The boarding pass was in the inside pocket of a coat she had already donated. She found it when the bag came back, wrong address on the tag, the charity's return sticker half covering Daniel's name. She almost didn't reach inside. She had already said goodbye to everything in that bag, gone through all of it twice before sealing it. But the pocket was heavy, and she checked, and the boarding pass was folded in half, the way he always folded things, creased exactly once down the center. She looked at the date. Then she looked at it again. It was the night of the Grayfield Road fire. Daniel had died in February, a cardiac event, the hospital called it, as if giving it a clinical name made it more comprehensible. He was 53. He had not been sick in any way Claire could identify. He went to bed on a Tuesday and did not wake up on Wednesday, and that was the end of 31 years of a life she thought she understood completely. The grief was not the kind that came in waves. It was more like a change in air pressure, constant, disorienting, something she adjusted to without meaning to. She went back to work after 6 weeks. She kept the house. She donated his clothes in stages, because doing it all at once felt like something she couldn't survive. The coat was the last item. Charcoal gray, wool, the one he wore every winter without fail. She had held it for a moment before folding it into the bag. She didn't think about Grayfield Road when she did it. Grayfield Road was 4 blocks from their house. In the fall of 2019, a house on that street had burned on a Thursday night. The woman who lived there, Rachel Kwan, 41 years old, married, no children, was found dead in the wreckage. The fire marshal ruled it accidental. A gas line, old wiring, one of those things. Claire had met Rachel twice, maybe 3 times. Neighborhood events. She seemed quiet. Her husband Marcus was the one who talked, easily, loudly, filling every room he entered. Marcus Kwan had stood at the edge of driveways in the weeks after the fire, shaking hands, receiving casseroles, looking the way a man looks when something terrible has happened to him. Daniel had been home that night. Claire was certain of this. She had a clear memory of them watching television, going to bed early, Daniel already asleep when she turned off the lamp. She had been certain, until now. The flight was Chicago Midway to Portland. Departed 6:14 in the evening, October 3, 2019. The fire on Grayfield Road was reported at 11:17 the same night. She sat with the boarding pass for an hour before she did anything. She turned it over. She set it down. She picked it up. The name was Daniel Marsh. His birth date on the confirmation number she looked up in his old email account, still open, password unchanged, an account she hadn't been able to close because closing it felt like the last door. The confirmation was there. He had booked the flight himself, 9 days before he took it. She told herself there were explanations. A work trip he hadn't mentioned. Something that slipped his memory, or hers. They had been married long enough that not every evening was accounted for. There are gaps in 31 years, ordinary ones, the kind that accumulate quietly. She told herself this. Then she found the hotel. It took her 2 evenings. She searched his email for October 2019, scanning for receipts and confirmations. Most of it was work, project updates, vendor threads, the ordinary sediment of a career. But on the 4th of October, there was a charge notification forwarded from a bank account she had almost forgotten existed. A secondary account, small, that Daniel had set up years earlier for what he called household miscellaneous. She had never paid close attention to it. The charge was from a hotel in Portland. One night, checked out October 4th, she sat back from the laptop and let herself think the obvious thing. A woman, a secret, the first place the mind goes, and she let it go there, held the shape of it long enough to feel what it would mean. The rewriting of a marriage that had felt, by every measure she trusted, like an honest one. But it didn't fit, not quite. Rachel Kwan had not been a person Daniel was close to. Their interactions had been brief and unremarkable. He had never mentioned her in any way that registered. No lingering conversations at the mailbox, no text she might have noticed, nothing that stood out. Whatever the flight was, it didn't feel like the shape of an affair. She went looking for Rachel. She found the obituary, short, formal, survived by husband Marcus, services private. No photograph, but she found one in an old neighborhood newsletter. Rachel standing near a folding table at a park cleanup, looking slightly away from the camera. Small, careful posture, the look of someone who had learned to take up less space. She looked at that photograph for a long time. She told herself she was doing research. Research felt more controlled than whatever this actually was. She found Marcus Kwan's professional profile, relocated to Atlanta after the fire, a management role, a new city. Remarried inside 18 months, his new wife's social media was public, travel photos, restaurant visits, weekend mornings. Marcus in the background of several, always smiling. Easy, untroubled, she kept going. On a neighborhood forum, buried deep in a search result, she found a post from 2018. A vague question from an anonymous user about resources for people in difficult home situations. The replies were careful, non-specific, but one of them, from an account that no longer existed on the platform, included a link to a domestic violence resource page. That reply had received one acknowledgement, from an account with no posts, no profile image, no followers. Created October of 2018. She found a cached version of the account's registration page. The email address was a string of letters and numbers, meaningless on its own. But the domain was one she knew. It was the internal domain of Daniel's employer. She sat very still. She thought about October 2018, a full year before the fire. She thought about whether she had noticed anything different in Daniel that month. She couldn't be certain. She thought about a conversation they'd had that winter, in the kitchen, the context of which she had long since lost. He had said, quietly and with more conviction than the conversation seemed to need, "Sometimes the most useful thing a person can do is be somewhere they can't be reached." She had thought he was talking about work pressure. She had not pressed him. She called the fire marshal's office. Not to file anything. She wasn't ready for that, but to request the public incident file on the Grayfield Road fire, which she was entitled to do. It arrived by email 4 days later. The report was 11 pages. She read it twice. The ruling was clear: accidental ignition, probable source a compromised connection in the basement gas line, accelerated by older insulation. The investigating officer noted that the home's gas infrastructure had not been serviced in 14 years. Nothing in the report suggested a second cause. And yet, she had lived in old houses her entire adult life. She knew what deferred maintenance looked like. She also knew that the inspection had been conducted 4 days after the fire, after the structure had been compromised, the ignition point damaged by the burn itself. She was not an arson investigator. She knew that. She was a woman in her mid-50s reading an 11-page PDF at a kitchen table, and she was careful to acknowledge what she was not qualified to conclude. But she kept returning to the timeline. Rachel had left Chicago on a flight Daniel arranged. She arrived in Portland under circumstances no one at home knew about. And Marcus Kwan came home that night to an empty house, to the realization that the person he controlled had finished disappearing without his knowledge. What does a man do when he understands that he has been outmaneuvered? She didn't know. She closed the file. She opened it again 2 days later. She closed it a second time. What she kept coming back to, the thing she couldn't put down, was the secondary account. Not the balance, which was modest, but the fact that it had existed at all. Set up years before Rachel needed help, as if Daniel had been keeping a small door open, for reasons she could never ask him about now. She wondered how long he had known. She wondered whether Rachel had told him something before the flight was ever booked, or whether the arranging itself had been the first sign that things were serious. She wondered what the conversation between them had looked like, where it happened, how it started, what Daniel had said that made Rachel trust him with the most dangerous thing she had. He had done it right. She could see that clearly. He had done it the way a person does something when they have thought about it seriously, understood the consequences of being caught, and decided to do it anyway. And then, immediately after that thought, he didn't tell me. She found Rachel on a Wednesday afternoon in April. It had taken her 6 weeks from the boarding pass. She was not reckless about it. She looked in the places a methodical person might choose: smaller employers, public records, the edges of things. She was looking for a new name in Portland, because the hotel receipt said Portland and the flight said Portland, and she had no reason to look anywhere else. She found a name that wasn't Rachel Kwan. A photograph in a company directory, small, slightly soft, taken at an angle easy to miss. She compared it to the newsletter image from 7 years earlier. The haircut was different, the face was older, but it was the same careful posture, the same way of standing as if still learning not to take up too much space. She did not call. She did not drive to Oregon. She wrote a letter instead, a single page, addressed to a P.O. box she was not entirely certain was correct, using the name that wasn't Rachel Kwan, explaining who she was without explaining too much. The reply came 9 days later. A single handwritten page. It said, "He came to tell me there was a flight. He said he had arranged everything. He said I had to leave before Marcus found out he had helped me, because if Marcus found out, it would go badly for everyone. He drove me to the airport himself. He said, don't tell anyone, including Claire." He said that was the hardest part. The letter said, "I didn't know about the fire until a week later. He called me from a payphone. He said Marcus must have done it after he understood I wasn't coming back. He said the fire marshal had ruled it accidental. He said we had to leave it there." The letter said, "I have thought about you for 6 years. I didn't know how to reach you without putting us both at risk. I'm sorry he kept it from you. I believe he thought he was protecting everyone. I think that is the kind of person he was." She read it 4 times. She folded it once down the center. There was no clean answer on the other side of that letter. She had expected something, resolution, clarity, the feeling of a knot finally worked loose. Instead, she had more pieces and the same absence at the center of everything. Daniel had helped a woman disappear. He had believed or known or suspected that her husband then set fire to an empty house to erase the evidence of her leaving. He had said nothing. He had lived with it for 6 years inside a marriage that was, by every measure she trusted, a real one. She did not report Marcus Kwan. She spent a month deciding and arrived at nothing, no body, no surviving physical evidence, no way to explain what she knew without dismantling the safety of the woman she had just found. She thought about the remarriage, the new city, the Instagram photos. She thought about it often. She could not find a door in it she was willing to open. She wrote back to Rachel. They exchanged 3 letters over the following year, careful, nothing that identified either of them too precisely. The third was shorter than the others. It said, "Thank you for telling me. I think I understand why he didn't. I am not sure I have decided how I feel about it yet." She kept the boarding pass. She is not certain why. It is in the kitchen, in a drawer, folded once down the center, exactly the way he would have done it. She has not taken it out again. But she has not thrown it away.